To rotate or tumble the viewpoint around the scene or around objects, you've got the Orbit tool, and it looks like a little planet Saturn. Select that to activate it, but before you click on anything, be aware that you don't usually orbit in an orthographic view. Orbit is most intuitive in a perspective view. If you orbit in an ortho view, you may get some unexpected results. We'll look at that in a moment, but first, let's just orbit in the perspective view. Click and drag in the center of the yellow circle, and you can tumble or orbit around the center of the screen. If you click on the little boxes on the left and right, you can orbit while maintaining a constant tilt. If you click on the upper or lower boxes, then you're able to orbit vertically while maintaining a constant pan rotation left to right. If you want to orbit around an object, you can select something. You can grab the Select Object tool, select something such as this chair, and go back to our Orbit tool. And now we're orbiting around that object rather than around the center of the screen. Now we're not rotating in the third axis around our line of sight. That's known as a canted angle or a Dutch tilt. If we click and drag outside the circle, the view rotates around the line of sight, and we get a Dutch tilt or canted angle. That's a cinematography technique that we only want to happen by design, not by accident. We need to be careful about where we click with the Orbit tool. Generally speaking, for scene navigation, we never want a Dutch tilt because it's visually confusing. Now, if you want to undo that movement, you will find that the standard undo up here doesn't work. And that's because these undo buttons up here are for scene commands. A scene command is something like creating an object or selecting, changing its transforms or parameters. The scene undo up here will undo any of those commands, but not viewport navigation. And in fact, we can right-click on the undo button, and it shows a history of our last scene commands. And the only one I have here is the selection of that object. So I can click on undo here, and that will undo the selection of that chair, but it doesn't undo the rotation of that perspective view. So there's a separate undo buffer for that, and it's found in the viewport menus. So we can go back over here and select the viewport label, or its name, in this case perspective. Click on that, and you get a little pop-up menu, and you've got an undo command there. It shows the name of the most recent command, undo view rotate. And now I've restored my horizon line back to level. Now, if you do use the Orbit tool in an ortho view, this is what happens. Click over there and then click in the center, and we get something called an axonometric projection, formerly known as a user view. It actually does say orthographic up here in the viewport label, but that's another misnomer because technically an orthographic view has to be parallel to the world coordinate grid. But this viewport is rotated arbitrarily here. It's not aligned with the world. In an axonometric projection, there is no perspective foreshortening. Objects maintain the same size on the screen regardless of distance. You can see I've got these windows here, and this one is closer to the view, but they're all drawn the same size. Another indicator that we're in an axonometric projection is that the lines of the grid never converge at a vanishing point. They always remain parallel. So this is something I never use anymore, but maybe it's of some use to you. A true isometric view is more helpful, but let's not get sidetracked. You can learn how to set up an isometric view in one of my other courses, 3ds Max Cinematography for Visualization. To restore the viewport to an orthographic view, once again you can use the viewport undo. There's a shortcut for that. It'll make it a little bit easier. Use the hotkey, and that's Shift+Z. Shift+Z to undo. Go back a few times until I'm back to my front viewport. Now I can restore the viewport to an orthographic view by choosing that view from the label menu here. So I can click on the name and choose the view I want to see, but that doesn't necessarily restore me back to where I was before. Using the undo hotkey of Shift+Z is probably a better idea. That's how to use the Orbit tool to tumble around a scene and how to undo viewport commands.